Hello. Well, I have occasionally discussed matters literary when I thought it relevant, and this is going to be one of those times. All of this has been sparked by a kerfuffle with Patreon and Sargon of Akkad, a prominent YouTuber who was involved in an argument with a group of people who, to his mind, had objectionable racial beliefs. And he threw at them, oh, just a minute, I'm checking the microphone. Yeah, that's right. And he threw at them an epithet of the sort which they have a habit of throwing at people who appear to have any sort of an African ancestry. When made aware of this, Patreon immediately terminated Sargon's account, despite the fact that, as it has been pointed out by many, others have come out with far worse and yet are still under Patreon's welcoming wings. Several videos have been made about the apparent specificity of Patreon's ostensible outrage. But when most have described Sargon's verbal sin, they felt compelled to resort to obfuscation when reporting what he actually said. They usually say that he used the N word. I have a bit of a problem with that because we all know what the N word means, so I don't quite understand why calling it the N word is going to be any different from actually using the word itself. However, apparently Patreon thinks this makes a whole world of difference. So, since Patreon is quite important to me, as I have few other financial options as yet, I have to be very careful. On the other hand, I wonder how Patreon takes to Joseph Conrad, that great writer of English literature, because in 1896, that towering genius wrote a book which I now intend to discuss. First of all, let's have a look at Conrad's canon. I just grabbed a pile of books off my bookshelves. So there's The Rover. That's not bad at all. There's The Heart of Darkness. Now, you must know that it was turned into a film with Marlon Brando called Apocalypse Now. And The Secret Sharer. That's a very good psychological novel. There's Youth. Is this book getting that? Youth and The End of the Tether. Chance. Not my favourite. And I think most critics think he was going off a bit by then. All right, there's The Outcast of the Islands. Gosh, I've got another edition of Chance. I have to do something about that. Nostromo. That was about a South American revolution. Very good book, that one. Under Western Eyes. Victory. That's all good stuff. And the Secret Agent. That's not showing up too much. You'll just have to take my word for it. The Secret Agent. And then several novellas. This one, Typhoon, it says here, Typhoon and Other Tales. So, what's the first tale in this edition? Oh, I might tell you, you've noticed a lot of these have to do with the sea. For those of you who don't know, Joseph Conrad was a sailor for most of the first half of his life. And yeah, I think he was a sailor till he was about 40, something like that. And then he started writing, and he wrote, obviously, about the sea, matters maritime. You might say matters nautical, because he wrote a very nautical novel here, and its name is Is this picking up the name? It looks all... hang on, I'll get it. Ah, there we are. Its name is The Nigger of the Narcissus. Not the N-word. It was written in 1980. Oh, goodness me. In 1896. It's a very weird short novel set on a boat which appears to be under some sort of jinx. There's a terrible storm at one point, and at another point, towards the end, the ship is becalmed. But mostly the jinx is the two new crew members, a West Indian called James Waite, the eponymous nigger, and a Cockney called Donkin, who each in their own way cause all sorts of trouble. And it's James Waite who's the focus of the book. Waite is consistently, throughout the story, referred to either by his name or as the nigger. Is this a disparagement? Well, it's certainly not an honorific, but neither is it an insult. It is, by the language of its times, a simple description. What's more important about Mr. Waite is that he has a profound effect on almost everyone aboard the ship, because almost from the moment of his introduction, it's very obvious that Waite is extremely sick and probably won't last the voyage, which indeed he does not. He has tuberculosis and spends most of the novella coughing himself, quite literally, to death. Bit by bit, as Jimmy Waite becomes more and more ill, almost the entire crew start to revolve around him. They start to take on his work. They start to anticipate his attacks of weakness. They even steal food for him, and they give him drinks topped up with their own precious sugar ration. At one point, during a furious storm, when it seems the ship will be entirely lost, two of the crew members risk their lives tearing at boards with their bare hands to save him when he was trapped in a flooded deck. He became the tormentor of all our moments. He was worse than a nightmare. You couldn't see that there was anything wrong with him. A nigger doesn't show tuberculosis. I suppose that's because having a dark skin, you can't see that he's losing facial colour, that's what they're saying. He was not very fat, certainly, but then he was no leaner than other niggers that we had known. He coughed often, but the most prejudiced person could perceive that mostly he coughed when it suited his purpose. He wouldn't or couldn't do his work, and he wouldn't lie up. This is another section. Once Donkin reviled him for half an hour, reproached him with the extra work his malingering gave to the watch, and ended by calling him a black-faced swine. Under the spell of our accursed perversity, we were horror-struck. You see, the crew themselves didn't like to say such things. They didn't like insults of that sort. So their use of the word nigger, you could see in their minds, was not an insult. We were horror-struck, but Jimmy positively seemed to revel in that abuse. And indeed, the more the crew nursed him, the more critical he was of them. The more they tried to comfort his dying days, the more he upbraids them for their lack of consideration. He had absolutely no gratitude for any of their care, and almost everything they do isn't good enough or not considerate enough. It isn't a coincidence that Conrad put the story aboard a ship called the Narcissus. Waite is definitely one of the most narcissistic characters in all of literature. I'm pretty sure that the phenomenon of the narcissistic personality disorder was not identified, well, maybe till the late 20th century, but Conrad, being the genius that he was, is certainly describing this particular disorder many, many years before anyone else had discovered it. He also describes the phenomenon of codependency, which you see at work in this story. That's why literature's so important, by the way, because good writers focus in on these things before the professionals of whatever they are have even begun to imagine them, let alone come up with a name for it. And I'm not talking only about personality disorders, I'm talking about science fiction and social commentary and human relationships and everything. Anyway, I digress. Let's get back to the nigger of the Narcissus. Towards the end of the story, while they're still at sea, James Waite dies, whereupon, almost immediately after the burial, the wind freshens up and the becalmed ship suddenly, in Conrad's words, spurts for home. Looking at the story, it's an obvious metaphor for the self-destruction inherent in a relationship where one person or group spends so much time looking after the wants or the anticipated wants of another person or group that they can't pay proper attention to their own lives or even to the jobs they have to do to keep their ship or their society alive and functioning properly. And it's a study of the manipulative pressure which can be exerted by one person or group who's willing to take advantage of the feelings of guilt of another person or group. We might well apply that in some situations to what's going on in our modern world, couldn't we? So, perhaps some of you might wish to try to read The Nigger of the Narcissus. All right, Patreon. Do you have anything to say?
I'm very grateful for financial contributions. But if you don't want to give money, you can still help a lot by sharing this and other videos I've made. Also, remember to check your subscription from time to time, as sometimes subscriptions get erased for one reason or another. Till next time.